Welcome to this week's mini symposium session. Jessie Henshaw is going to be talking this week, and she's going to be talking about language and the language of systems. So, Jessie, over to you.
All right, thank you. And just in case anyone who sees this in the future, everyone here knows me pretty well, but in this recording, I was a physicist and then changed to architecture because I noticed physics didn't notice the designs of life, and that seemed pretty important and relieved me from the absolutism of physics too. But then I found that there was a system that was common to every system, and that was growth, because systems emerge by a organizational process that's a nonlinear one. So that is where my thinking began for my various kinds of research. And here I'm looking into language, what I found out looking back in history to where the most useful words we have seem to have come from ancient times and not so much modern times. Modern words often are fantasy words that distort the intent. Anyway, so the subject is a general systems view of systems in context as opposed to in abstraction. Abstraction being one of the problems that distorts natural language. When we discover the genome of language, we find out why. Language seems to have begun with focusing on observations of working systems, not abstract theories. We use abstract theories for something else. And in ancient times, and I'm not talking about the Middle Ages or the Roman period, but 20 and 100,000 years ago, which we'll review some of the most interesting parts of as regards to the language evolution. And then I found a problem with physics, and then I studied physics closely and saw that continuity is needed in change, and mathematical equations generally are either infinite or discontinuous, and so they don't fit nature. And then I found that the continuity of change is produced by organizational process we call growth. There may be others, but that is definitely the most common one. And then, as you see in their emerging forms, following an S curve in the data that we find. But our minds imagine what we see is there, unaware of how it reflects the very complex processes going on in nature. We see a bird fly by. We know that the bird is complicated. We don't know that the air currents around it are complicated too. So lots of things get missed. Anyway, this is the genome of languages, starting with the end of this talk. The earliest explorers, this is the Homo sapiens in particular, although the prior ones were also part of it. 200,000 years ago, Kenya, most that area, and then learn to enunciate sounds to each other, and would, I presume, if you see that they have organized ways of relating to each other, and as evident in having tools and rituals and so forth, you can well imagine that they were babbling away to each other using sounds that referred to things or experiences or impressions, etc., that they were doing informally. Well, they may have thought it was formally compared to our opinions of things. It may have seemed informal, or a lot of it onomatopoetic, of just sounds suggesting the things referred to, like ma and pa. Ma is hugging and pa is pushing. But anyway, I digress. Anyway, here is the relationship of a word that refers to some physicalities, systemicities, seasons, horizons, variety, majesty, relations, behaviors, or inhabitants of the planet, like tree, and a person seeing that tree, absorbing some of the complexity that it is based on, then develops feelings, visions, reasoning, learning, caring, planning, experiencing, meaning, impressions, and values to share. And so this is where words apparently came from. And you can see that in the oldest of words, generally being the most specific about something real, and the newest of words being the ones that are most fantastically invented and perhaps detached from reality. But it's something that is a powerful bit of evidence when we dig into it, that pointing to nature's designs with a verbal sound and attached with shared values added by the explorers, of course, the first people who traveled the continents, that very early in the evolution of Homo sapiens, that's the red here, there were explorers that went all the way to the limits, well, not over to the Western continent, but throughout Europe and in between the ice ages. They went very far. There's archaeological evidence. Large communities didn't travel till later, but the Neanderthals in the brown color, they were the generation before the sapiens, and Homo erectus was the first traveling human. They went very far. So all this time, we were probably talking with each other, we euphemistically, or referring to another time. Now, here's the interesting evidence of when the biggest change in our history occurred. There's this thing called a bottleneck, where we had a number of different human species, and then at a certain point, about 850,000 years ago, it dropped to a population of only 1,500 humans on Earth, or humanoids. And the surviving ones were a select group of the Homo erectus population that had been around for some time. So in terms of the thermal history of the Earth, the Holocene is this sort of horizontal period here, and then the Younger Dryas, the freezing part before 10,000 BC in Europe, and then in the preceding ice ages, there was a glaciation peak, which is the trough of the drawing, where the temperature is down to -5, I guess. I don't know how to read that exactly. It's what these may be absolute temperatures or simply differences from some mean. But then there was a moment right here, just a little after that trough, when it was warmest, that there was this cataclysmic collapse of human populations, except for one, Homo erectus. Now, this is a very artistic, suggestive drawing, which does not reflect statistical mapping of anything, but gives the idea of, at this point, 850,000 years ago, several of the variants of hominoid species disappeared, and this says erectus here, as if they were going up here. That's not true. This should be up here. This should be deeper trough, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, then there's the transition species Heidelbergensis, and then the Neanderthal, and the Denisovan, and then the sapiens. And then the sapiens, why they repeated that, I'm not sure. But anyway, that's the pattern, that there was a big collapse. So from this point on, I think we were babbling away. That's what I'm getting to. And refining. But that means Neanderthals were probably a speaking species. So this is the wonderful diagram that shows where this later evolution, 200,000 years ago, is the emergence of Homo sapiens. And first, there was a 70,000 years ago, large populations moving to the Middle East and then to Australia, but only that. And then some of those joined the 50,000 year ago emigration from the Levant, the Mediterranean communities, and then to Europe. And then various other times as the Ice Age, the last Ice Age, I believe, withdrew. Now here I'm testing myself. Was that, well, I guess it looks like it was 10 or 12,000 years ago, the ice allowed these further northern and western. So this is 25,000 now. So it must have been the ice was possible to cross the Bering Strait on 25,000 years ago, is what this says. So, but language was developing all these times, and the magical pattern that most of this was preceded by explorers before there were large population movements, and these routes of travel, and then working backward, trade. The explorers would pass their discoveries and their insights as words back along the paths of the diasporas. And that isn't really shown in detail. It would have been a very furry looking diagram to show all the paths of outward exploration. But there were very early explorers, and then there were small and then larger travel of whole communities. And so that is where mapped out here, this is 500,000 on Homo sapiens in Africa. That maybe that should be 3. I'm not sure. You get numbers from different places, and so you have to think all of these are a little fuzzy. Anyway, I'm not going to go through all this, but it shows the staging of our expansion and the communication backward along the routes of travel, where ideas would pass from one culture to another, different languages appearing, obviously, like we have geographically, but the ideas can be passed along unchanged, somehow making the languages translatable to one another. This is one of the pieces of evidence that I rest my case on, I guess what you would say, that to produce translatable languages that are very different, they had to be sharing the concepts of life and referring to the common observables of life, and observables and experiences, like mother and father. The ma and pa are in Chinese, they're in every Indo-European language, along with lots of other cognates. And so I think that happened because of the early explorers not thinking of politics or anything, but just exploring, doing this fascinating, wonderful, moving through the strange world of wonderful things, and naming and interpreting and discovering and finding how to do things. And of course, then the other big piece of evidence is the when we first see languages written down, that was only 3,000 years ago, and they were full blown. Greek and Latin were full blown, richly variegated languages by the time we first saw a single letter that's readable to us today, and Hebrew as well. Although Greek and Latin were more naturalistic languages, and Hebrew was a religious, more religious-oriented language. But so differences of all kinds, and of course you can see Far Eastern languages as well. And anyway, so the how the words get composed, then you have like a suffix for nouns, ACY. That's privacy, fallacy, delicacy. It sort of means like. And so that's a common attachment to a noun, a thing word, as meaning having the qualities of. And so all these prefixes and suffixes you can find generally have a very consistent bending of the meaning of the root subject of the word. And so that's a very sophisticated thing for the pre-writing communities of humans to be doing. Of course, it was organized much more as it was written down, Greek and Latin in particular. And what gets missed a little bit then in the history of the Greek and Latin in particular, the Hebrew history is fascinating as well, relating to the Babylon and the descending cultures of capitalism that came originally from Babel, I believe. That's the evidence. The Roman and Greek were sort of invaded by that. Both became very capitalistic, but in my original point here was to be that both Greek and Roman, originated from highly egalitarian, highly thoughtful communities, that they started from an appreciative relation with nature. And I can't go into that much, just to say that that is clearly the evidence that you get from asking, where did these amazing languages come from? They didn't come from battling aristocrats. They came from very thoughtful people who very carefully coordinated what they saw with what they shared. And anyway, so reading natural systems in context, which is what I think they were doing, and what we still do quite a lot of. I mean, even working in the kitchen, we interpret what we see in relation to what's around, which is what context is and what science generally omits. Science is marvelous for finding rules that we can calculate uncertainties for, but it doesn't tell you what's happening. So anyway, so noticing changes coming to a head, so that usually is a sign for responding to something. Like if you are feeling a chill, you've probably been getting colder for some time, but it gets to a point where, oh, that's a signal. And so you're reading the context in that situation, or noticing changes in a relationship. You may be talking along with someone and all of a sudden notice a cooling or a warming of the responses, and say, whoa, something's going on. What's this related to? And my most useful one has been noticing ironies that remain unresolved. Like why? Why do we have clearly the most informed and responsive and ingenious species on Earth pushing its economies to grow to their own extinction? That doesn't make any sense. How did we get there? So those are the kinds of ironies. I guess, I don't know, I should have a list of the earliest ones. I guess one of the earliest ones was when I was studying air currents after architecture school. And I noticed that they developed by growth. And then I realized, everything has to. For continuity, you can't have energy can't be created or eliminated. It has to transition. And so for organizational processes to change, they have to have an organizational change process, which turns out to be the nonlinear progression of growth, which is you see everywhere. Anyway, so but there is today we do have both abstract learning as with science and many cultures have certain abstract beliefs, and certainly they're very useful and powerful. Particularly of course the one that took over the world, the abstract method of giving creative people resources, and so that they can enormously profit, and the giver can enormously profit too. That is the root method of capitalism, and it's very generous. It's very fruitful, and it doesn't have any rules about limits. So that the one is an explosive process, and the other is a sort of a non-existent one, or an unformed one, is the contrast that I see and causing the difficulties we have. But so here I show the S curve of A being the growth, the compound growth, and B being the maturation growth that living systems follow to mature and then have a long sustainable life. And somehow capitalism never learned about anything except A. Something about the signals that tell us to change to B don't tell our societies to change to B. They just keep going up and up and up and up. Like you can see this curve here. This is the CO2 curve. We started slowing CO2 down about 50% of the way back to its rise. It keeps accelerating its acceleration as we're trying to slow it down. So that points to a cognitive error, and I'm not going to go into that, but this is the kind of just exploring and piecing together of things, studying systems in context that I do. Anyway, so an abstract learner will see this curve and say, the shape is nice, but form and engagement have no scientific meaning. The form and engagement, or formation, maturation, engagement, that's the three words there that typify the main periods of a growth system reaching its climax. And then the experiential learner might say, oh, thank you. It's abstract, but it is also the story of how everything works. Now I know to look for the changes. And then if you were to combine the two, which is what we need to do culturally, I think, oh my, both say abstraction, oh my, both say, oh no, this is not making good English. The abstraction helped me look at the contexts and learn much more about how things work. And that's what I use it for. I use this as it's sort of like a dowsing stick, you know. You ever hear of one of those? You know, a farmer goes out in the yard with a Y-shaped piece of a sapling and finds the place to drill a well. I don't know. But I use it for a more substantive purpose. I use this to see when the contexts that I'm observing are changing and be able to judge how they're successfully making their transitions from one state to another. And then a lot of other stuff here. This is the second row here is a co-shan. You could also put that co-operation. That might be a little easier to understand, but it shows how these syllables really are organized to convey very specific meaning about in this case, the together. You know, what you do, you operate as a process, shun. But anyway, so I've already covered much of this in what I said. This is an illustration of the Tower of Babel, not a real thing. It's a mythical thing that has enough references in literature that you pretty much assume it was a real phenomenon of some kind. Who knows? This is a Hopi symbol of thunder, rain and thunder. These are the thunder clouds, but showing a great attention to the nuance of nature. And then here's one that's quite modern, is Mickey Mouse, very upset with his magical use of brooms to carry water flooding his abode, and that the sorcerer had left unattended for a little while, and Mickey got in trouble reading the wrong page or not reading to the end of the story of how you get a broom to carry water. And so this is where we are. We're smashing things all over the place that get in the way. We have our systems so overproducing, we're creating heavy dependencies on things that are going to rapidly run out in short order. And I should probably repeat that. We're creating, that growth is creating heavy dependencies on accelerating use of things that will rapidly run out in relatively short order, I should say, perhaps. But so we're at the Mickey Mouse stage. We are very immature, as every growth system is, as it reaches its limits. Of course, most growth systems survive and thrive. In nature, if you look around, what we see are systems that grew, matured, and survived. So that might possibly still be possible for us. Here's again the evidence of what our current growth system, our boundless plan of multiplying, using money is our mode of exchanging value, using money to help creative people create things and give wealth to the funder and multiplying exponentially. As you see, this is the CO2 curve. The GDP curve is much the same. This also shows, well, there was a cognitive error in even the concept of sustainability. You know, somehow sustainability became sustaining the growth system, not the earth. That's another kind of irony that is very productive when you're looking around in an open system for what's going on. Here you can also find things that the inflammation of antipathy, the all-out hatred expressed along the path of the migration crises, and the failure of systems, the excesses and evil intents and desperation of people. And
Jesse, I just thought I'd better let you know you used 35 minutes so far.
well,
So
I
be
can
careful.
finish up pretty quick, actually.
Okay, I can see you have a lot of slides still to come. So I was just letting you know.
I could. I have actually this. I didn't thin out this. There is a stopping point coming up soon. Anyway, so this could become contextual science, conceptual science, or abstraction science, and then each of them having their say. And that's what I personally have really enjoyed the most, is having my feelings, which is mostly contextual, reviewed by my reasoning, and the reverse, and having my reasoning reviewed by my feelings. And it seems to give me lots of things to check out and helps me see where I'm on the right track with things and off the right track, or off the track. Anyway, so that's basically what this is about. Here, I'll just read a line or two. Science finds so many useful rules. Why be concerned with contexts? Well, we rely on systems, and systems rely on their contexts. Contexts are also what cause systems pushed to their limits to so misbehave. That's one of the most basic things that science failed to notice, is that systems are organizations that have working parts and working relationships, and they misbehave when they're pushed beyond their limits. Whereas math says, hey, infinity, no problem. Just, project. And that's not how the earth works. How full of surprise nature is. After long silences, responding energetically as things spring to life, what's not to like? Don't they self-animate by exploding their resources? What could go wrong? So those kind of. So anyway, this is the abstraction that I have found most useful for thinking about the life paths of systems in contexts. This is a little map of the stages that are observable: the germination, the accelerating self-assembly from a nourishing environment of some new system, the response to the change in context, making a turn forward instead of replicating the original design, coordinating with the future environment, of looking to the future. So this growth is expanding on the past and then turning to focus on the future, noticing the new relationships that can and need to be made, as a child does. They see these big people wandering around, and they say, oh, they do things. Those kinds of realizations. And of course, when you're finally matured and ready to go off on your own, taking a human perspective here, you come to the point where you are just glad to be free and make a few mistakes and usually figure it out. So these links, some of this is the slides. This comes from the slides I did for the Washington conference in June, and at that I should have the link to the talks from that conference that were assembled and recently published. They're on the site. You can go to the meetings page and find it. That is what this link here would take you to, is my reference and resource page for that paper and talk. But this didn't get updated this week while I was preparing for the talk. Anyway, so I've had fun so far. I'm wondering what you all will have to say, and thanks so much. I appreciate this time.
Thanks.